Hey guys, I'm recording this on Sunday, January 18th, 2026. And I think instead of just telling you about this book that I'm working on and how hard it is, I'm just going to give you little updates on what's going on. And today I got a really good one that will really explain the challenge in writing this book. All right. So today I'm writing about the great Robert Koch, that's C-O-C-H, and Koch's postulates. And this guy is one of the foundations to the treatment of infectious disease. Okay, his work, his great genius insights. Well, it turns out he wasn't that much of a genius, and he injured and killed a lot of people. And so I'm writing a chapter about that. And I'm not talking about a few. I'm talking about thousands, maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. I don't know. It's hard to do the math this late. But there's no dispute that Robert Koch, with his initial treatment of tuberculosis, spent a year um, basically killing people by he had a drug that he developed called tuberculin, and he said it was the world's greatest drug and everybody should use it, and he marketed it wildly and widely all over the world to doctors and hospitals. And when it started failing, he insisted that they were doing it wrong. And finally, after over a year, it was acknowledged that this thing killed people. So I don't know how many, I mean, you tell me how many people died, right? A lot of people had tuberculosis in those days, and a lot of people were getting this treatment, and a lot of them that got this treatment died. So I'm writing that chapter. So, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating that, like, we look at Fauci, right? And we look at what a psychotic moron he was and how much damage he caused, and we think that was a one-off. And I'm telling you folks, as I do the actual history of medicine, I'm not stretching, I'm not doing conspiracy theories. This is the actual documented history of modern medicine. I'm finding Anthony Fauci's everywhere, at every single juncture, at every great milestone of medical history. I'm finding an Anthony Fauci level catastrophe. And what's weird, and why this book is frankly so important, um, is that there seems to be a system in place that routinely elevates these guys, right? In normal, like if you're a car mechanic, right? And five people get their car fixed and five of them get killed because you did it wrong, maybe you're not going to be an auto mechanic much longer, right? Well, if you're a leader of medicine and you have the right political juice, it appears you can kill hundreds of thousands of people and you won't even have a scratch on you. I mean, this is the history of medicine. And it ain't just, and if you don't know who Koch is, you know who, I'm trying to think of basketball. I'm thinking of Wilt Chamberlain. That's going way back. But Michael Jordan, he's the Michael Jordan of infectious diseases. And this guy was a psychotic lunatic who killed, I'm going to say tens of thousands, but it could have been hundreds, right? So like the guy, and this is the foundational guy. It's, Louis Pasteur, Robert Koch. I mean, that's it. Those are the guys, right? And I'm writing this chapter on Pasteur. Pasteur was another lunatic. Like, I'm not talking about he made a couple of mistakes here and there. That's why the title of the book is Diabolical Errors. We're all going to make mistakes, and we have to give some slack to doctors and nurses, um, because their mistakes are much more serious, but we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. But when you force a mistake down people's throat, down millions of people's throats, when you know it's wrong, well, then we got a serious problem. And I just defined modern medicine for you. And so here's the point. I'm trying to finish this chapter, right? And I realized, boy, this just drug to, so this you understand. The original cure was a dose that is 10,000 times the size of how this particular drug was used later. They pivoted. They went from this is the great master cure for tuberculosis to, oh, this is a good diagnostic technique to see if somebody has TB or not. Okay. The great cure, you ready? Was 10,000 times the size of the dose they used for the diagnostic. We're not talking about, oh, it's off by 10%, 20%, 50%, 100%, 10,000 times. And now, I don't know what they do now, but after they pivoted back in the, I guess this was it was the late 19th century. Um, they were using this thing, tuberculin, as the cure. It was basically just to let you know, it was blowing up people's lungs, literally. People would get this thing, they'd get a huge fever, and then they would start coughing up blood, and then all their organs would fail, and they'd die. This went on for a year and a half before they finally said, oops, we didn't make a mistake, but don't do that anymore. And then what they said is, oh, it's really a diagnostic technique. That's why this drug is so amazing. And they lowered the dose by a factor of 10,000. And instead of doing it transdermally, like going through the skin into the fat of the body, they now just, it's like a skin prick. They just inject it into the level of the skin at 1/10,000th the amount that the great Robert Koch was advocating for a year and a half. First he said, oh, well, the reason people are getting sick is because it shows that the drug is working. Then when it was like, oh, that's not quite right, then he said, well, it's because you're giving it to people that are already so far gone that nothing will help them. And then that proved to be false. And then he started saying, well, you're giving it in the wrong doses. You're giving it the wrong way. You're not following the protocol. This went on for over a year. And after person after person after person was being killed. Okay, so this is what I'm writing about now. And this was going to start, and I'm going to be a broken record on this. This started as a paragraph. And as I, dug deeper and deeper and deeper, I'm like, why have I never heard this story? I'm fairly well informed. I have never heard this story anywhere. And yet this is actual medical history. So anyway, I said, this sounds a whole lot like AZT, right? Originally, AZT was given in massive doses because it was the cure for AIDS. And it probably gave over 1 million people the symptoms of AIDS and killed them. That's according to John Lauriston, a Harvard-trained statistician. And then what they've done, because they still prescribe, I thought I was informed. They still use AZT. They still use it. They just reduce the dose. So they knew I mean, they used to wake these poor guys and gals up every 2 hours and give them another dose, another dose, another dose, another dose. And now they just give them a smaller dose twice a day when they use it. Now, here's the horrifying thing. I'm just going to read this, okay? Actually, I'll let you see it too. They're still using AZT. Who are they using it on? They're using it on the poor. And what poor are they using it on? Excuse me, I'm going to cough. They're using it on women in labor and newborn babies. Now, it's 2026, guys. I thought I was informed. I made a whole film, Fauci's First Fraud. I got the book. I've got, I think 30 plus or 50, I don't know how many footnotes in Robert Kennedy's book on Fauci. And I'm kind of expert in this. And I didn't know they were still doing it. So let's take a look at this. See why this book is so hard to write? It's like I'm writing about the history of tuberculosis, and next thing I know, I'm in another several hours finding out yet another horror. And why am I writing this book? We need to know how bad this system, as bad as you think this system is, as much as I've been railing against it for decades, it is so far worse than our wildest imaginings. Now, is this a cause for depression? Well, I mean, it's not happy. It'd be nice if the $1 trillion a year we spend, and it is $1 trillion, it might be more, on medical care was actually helping people consistently and not injuring and killing them. That would be nice. But we got to start somewhere. We got to start with some acknowledgement of what's going on. And also we really got to get smart about our health, so I've got a second book that's on the stove called Food, Drugs, and Mayhem. And it's just it's like an encyclopedia, alphabetically, topic by topic of, just all the crazy stuff they've done. But the book I'm working on now is called Diabolical Errors, and it's just the history. You just take all the great breakthroughs in modern medicine, the Louis Pasteurs, the Robert Kochs, all these other guys, and we just explain what they actually did and how, I mean, none of the science, it's so weird. It's like, let's say you invented a plane and it went up in the air and then it crashed. And like and 5 minutes later, it crashes and kills everybody. But everybody goes, that was the great breakthrough. And then without improving the assumptions upon which the plane was built, you then layer on all of what we call modern medicine. This is, I'm not like, this isn't even an exaggeration. This is how they did it. They had a faulty method that failed miserably. They declared victory, and that faulty logic became the foundation for all medicine. And then, and this is also in the book, they then set out very deliberately, very energetically to meticulously eradicate any opposition, any alternate view of medicine. So they built this thing on in a completely rotten foundation, and then they went out and wiped out anybody that had a different approach to health. So the thing we have to know, this is turning into a long one. The thing we have to know is, like medicine's tough. It's hard. Human beings are complicated. Individuals are complicated. One size does not fit all. And you really need, if you want to help somebody, you really need to get into their business and know exactly how they're living, what they're eating, are they sleeping, what they're thinking, what they're wearing, I mean, you need to know a lot of stuff. Okay? That's real medicine. Then there's veterinary medicine for factory farms, where you got 10,000 pigs in a room. And, you're just trying to get enough of them to the slaughterhouse um, so you can come out profitable. You're not really worried about the health of those pigs. You're looking for stuff you can inject into them to keep. I mean, this I know, and in the livestock industry, why do they give antibiotics to factory farmed animals? To make them healthy? No, to keep them on their feet long enough to get them to the slaughterhouse. So they're sick as hell, but the antibiotics is keeping them from falling over, right? That model of medicine is the model that is used to treat human beings today in our modern world. That is it. And even Pasteur started out as an industrial chemist. He had no training in physiology. He had no training in medicine. Okay. And I'm telling you a lot about what's in the book. So everybody's heard of Pasteur and how great he is and all this. And the reason Pasteur was important was we were going from a artisanal food production system. Everything was artisanal, right? Everybody, there was a village baker and there was the local guy that grew this. And, you'd go to the market and everything that you ate came from within 10 miles. I mean, that was the way it was. And so in the 19th century, everything obviously got heavily industrialized and urbanized. And so mass production of food became if you're going to do that, you had to mass produce food. And the mass production of food was failing miserably. Also, even things like silk, right? Making silk. Um, that was done, I call it artisanally, done on a small scale where people could watch, they could see what was going on. But once you factoryized it and did it on a vast scale, all kinds of errors became possible that were not easily seen. And so what Pasteur did and what, was accomplishment, he figured out how to process milk, how to process wine, how to process spirits even. He figured out how to keep silkworms healthy when you're going from a smallish shed to a vast, factory type setting. So he figured all that out. That was good. All right. In fact, sidebar, the first factory farming ever was silkworms. It was the first time anybody tried to, manage life on an industrial scale. And he's the one that figured out, I mean, maybe he did, maybe he stole the idea from somebody else. He was such a crook, such a fraud. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They always talk, they're always talking, oh, he was so selfless. He never cared about money. And then you look at the house he lived in. His wife had her own private living room, right? I mean, this house was massive. It's huge. They have a chapel dedicated to the honoring of his dead body. There is a chapel at the Pasteur Institute. I only learned this recently. I got to update the book now, with mosaics and things everywhere, and then a big coffin in the middle of the room, and there was nothing there was nothing modest about this guy. He was a megalomaniac. Anyway, I'm kind of getting off the track here, but what I want to show you what I discovered today, and this is why the book is taking long, because it's like if you ever tried to repair an old house or something, or a really old car, you think you got it, and then you realize, oh my God, this is broken too, and this is broken, and this is broken, but this thing is vast. So I want to show you what I found today, and it's pretty horrifying, and I don't mean to horrify you, but we need to know who our enemy is. All right, let's look at this. Okay. All right. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. There we go. Okay. So I'm writing some of my scientific and doctor friends, and I'm asking, so here's what I discovered today. AZT, this deadly thing, which we know is highly toxic, which no one would take in their right mind. And this is 2026, I'm recording this, is still being given to women in labor. Yeah, you heard that right. Women in labor, and it's also being given to newborn infants. Okay. So I'm just going to read this. And I worked with ChatGPT to do this, but believe me, I had to ask lots and lots of questions because it was giving me the party line, the party line, the party line. And I'm like, wait a minute. This, am I understanding correct? Basically, I kept asking it, is this real? I mean, are you talking about something that happened years ago, or are you talking about something that's happening now? Is there documentation for this? So yeah, it's not like ChatGPT just gave this up to me. All right, so let me read this to you. It is genuinely surprising to discover that in 2026, women in labor and newborn infants are still being given AZT, a drug introduced in the mid-1980s at the height of the AIDS crisis, and later recognized as highly toxic at its original doses. Yet this is still happening, not routinely, but selectively. And here's the thing that makes my blood boil. Overwhelmingly to the poor, marginalized, and medically unserved women and their babies, both globally and at the edges of wealthy health systems. So in other words, if you're poor in this country and you are vulnerable, you may find yourself on the receiving end of a AZT IV as you're giving birth. The mind reels. So here's what actually occurs. Now here's the basis on which they're making this judgment. If a pregnant woman is known to be HIV positive, and we all know what a crock that is, and does not have documented, I want to repeat that, documented suppressed viral load near delivery, as measured by the fake PCR test, or if her HIV status is simply unknown at the time she arrives in labor, hospital protocol allows clinicians to intervene immediately. So I'm going to talk about what that intervention is in a second. But I want you to get this clear. If a poor woman in this country, in the U.S., in the great U.S., shows up at a hospital and cannot document that she doesn't have HIV, the clinician can put AZT IV into her while she's giving birth. And they're doing this. And that's not enough. They're going to give it to the baby too, right as soon as it's born. Okay. So if a woman just simply shows up and they don't know, hey, I don't know if you got AIDS or not, so we're just going to wire you up unless you can prove you don't. This is happening. I mean, there are a lot of poor, not everybody has a happy life. Some people are living way at the edges, and women are vulnerable. Young women are vulnerable. They get pregnant and they get, show up at a hospital and this is what they're going to get. Unbelievable, man. I thought, I always think I've seen it all. I've gotten to the bottom of it all, like there's no more horror to be found, but yes, there is. Okay. So during the labor, the mother is given intravenous AZT, and it's what they call a loading dose. And again, I had to spend hours, I had so many terms that they're thrown around that I had to get defined of 2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight over 1 hour. That is a ton of AZT. So the loading dose is the original dose, then followed by continuous IV infusions of 1 milligram per kilogram per hour. And they give it to her. This woman's in labor, and they're doing this to her. I mean, do we have to wonder why our mother and infant survival rate is the worst in the developed world by 1,000,000-fold? All right, so after birth, the newborn is given AZT syrup, 2 milligrams per kilogram every 6 hours. How long? For weeks, depending on assessed risk. In other words, pulling it out of thin air. And these are not symbolic doses, they're systemic drug exposures administered at the moment when mother and infant are physiological vulnerable. To say the least, the justification for this intervention is entirely laboratory driven, not clinical. In other words, 0 symptoms. Healthy woman comes in, can't prove she's got that she's HIV free. Some psychotic obstetrician can wire her up for AZT and have her baby, a newborn baby, put on a continuous dose of AZT. This is 2026, guys. My mind's exploding on this. I just found this out this morning, right? Let me bold this for my friends. A PCR test, which the inventor of, Kerry Mullis, said is crap and should never be used as a diagnosis for anything. If the virus is detectable above protocol thresholds, you can almost hear it coming out of Fauci's mouth, or has not recently been measured. Hey, we haven't met you. Can you prove that you don't have this? Well, you're going to have some AZT then. Or it's not documented at delivery. The system just treats this uncertainty as risk and defaults to prophylaxis. This is the mentality of large numbers of people in the medical world. The logic is simple and it's mechanical. It's factory forming. If viral suppression cannot be proven on paper, if it cannot be proven on paper, in other words, this woman comes in, she's completely healthy, but she can't prove on paper that she doesn't have the deadly AIDS virus. So then transmission is possible to the baby. Now, in wealthy countries, this situation is now uncommon. Believe me, during the AIDS-crazed state, a lot of women were having their babies taken away for not being willing to do this. So most HIV-positive pregnant women receive the modern antiviral retroviral therapy, the cocktail, and they have undetectable loads well before labor. They have undetectable load. I don't even want to get into the bullshit of this non-science. Where this protocol persists is where women who with late or no prenatal care. There are women that unfortunately don't have anyone to look after them, and they're pregnant. So if they haven't had early care or they have had no care, they're going to, and they're poor and they show up at a hospital to give birth, they're going to fall into the clutches of these people. Now, if women without consistent access to modern HIV medications, so if they're not getting the cocktail, they're suspect. Now, this is really frightening. Women delivering in under-resourced hospitals, so poor hospitals. And we're going to see what under-resourced means and how that leads to them getting AZT while in labor. And this kind of answers that. Women in low-income countries following older, cheaper World Health Organization compatible regimes. So in other words, what I found from writing my book is they'll develop a protocol like Coke. He never admitted that his tuberculin killed thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Never admitted it. And tuberculin, I don't know if it's still used, but it was used for a long time as a diagnostic. Okay. So this is the way this works, just so you understand this. They'll launch a drug. They'll promise the moon. They'll kill a whole bunch of people, and then they'll pull it back and say, well, it's only for this specific population. We didn't really mean it. We really didn't mean that everybody should take it. They very rarely do they admit defeat. Only like 2 to 3% of FDA-approved drugs are actually withdrawn, but a huge percentage have their use case really tightly constrained. So they basically kill and injure less people. That's how it works. We should all know this. We all should have learned this in school. And the great podcaster should have told us this too. All right, let's get back to this. Wish I knew how to use all these things. That's wrong. Let me get out of here. There we are. Okay. So anyway, they created this protocol in the 80s. The WHO put their rubber stamp on it, and they never changed it. So if you're in a poor country, they're using the older, cheaper, WHO-compatible regimen. It may be lunatic. It may be injuring people. It may be pointless, but it's on a piece of paper somewhere. So that's what our great doctors and nurses are doing. And, order followers is what they are. And it gets worse. I mean, in other words, there is no longer this is no longer the standard of care for the privileged. Okay, so if you're in a wealthy country, if you're in good circumstances, this will not happen to you as a woman in labor and as a newborn baby. But if you're not, this is still on. Remember I wrote this book, excuse me, What the Nurses Saw? Right? This is the same thing. They've got a protocol. It's written down. Doctors and nurses read the thing. Oh, I got to do this, this, and this. Okay, I'll do it. Oh, gee, everybody's dying in front of me. Oh, well, just keep doing it. Now, the doctors and nurses, or the nurses, because I don't know many doctors that fought back, but the nurses that fought back, we know were fired and hunted down, basically. But anyway, it is a fallback protocol. It's still endorsed. It's still legal. It's still operational. Let me put that in bold for my friends who are going to be reading this. And it's disproportionately applied to those with the least ability to refuse, question, or escape. If you're a pregnant woman giving birth, you're not escaping from the hospital. Where are you going to go? Oh, God. This is a written policy, and it does not depend on symptoms. In other words, it doesn't depend on common sense observation on the part of the doctor. Now, Ken, you're asking me, you must be crazy. This can't possibly be true. You've got some crazy information that you found from some lunatic website and you're blowing it all out of proportion. Nope. Nope. You can go to the Center for Disease Control right now today and read their prevention HIV perinatal prevention guidance. You can go to the great National Institutes of Health and see their perinatal guidelines, which they talk how to use AZT on women in labor. And it includes the exact dosing tables, just so the nurses, doctors and nurses get it right. We don't want them to get it wrong. We want a clinical dose. And then we can go to our great American college, and I have multiple chapters on these people in the new book, obstetricians, modern obstetricians. Oh my God. Oh, a total horror show. But you can go to the website of that august organization and read their committee opinions on prenatal and perinatal HIV testing. Remember I told you, everybody goes, well, how did this COVID thing, one day we were fine and the next day the whole world was on fire. It must have been real, right? Because there must have been a real disease. How could everybody have been in sync like that? Well, the fact that everybody was in sync shows you it wasn't a real disease. Everybody in medicine today is still under the HIV equals AIDS equals miserable death, certain miserable death uh, um, mythology. You can't question it. To this day, you cannot question that. You will not be in medicine. You will not be a doctor. You will not be a public health official. You will not even be an elected official if you question that. And so this madness related to the use of AZT persists. And, all these guys and some gals, I guess, obstetricians, they're happy to collect their check, just carrying out this atrocity. So here's in these guidelines. Oh, this is, I mean, I mean, you're getting this as soon as I've discovered it. And so you're seeing my level of shock. In these guidelines, neither the woman nor the newborn is required to have any symptoms of HIV or AIDS. Not one. They don't even have to have the sniffles. But if they're poor and they can't and they just wandered in off the street and they can't document, I can just see this. A woman shows up at the emergency room, God help her. And they, cart her away. And where's your proof you don't have AIDS, bitch? And then what do? If she can't prove it, and we got some psycho doctor, she's going to get an IV of AIDS, of HIV, of AZT. You got to really hate human beings to be in that business. You have to have massive contempt for human beings, for women, for pregnant women, for nature. And these guys have MDs after their names, and no one's going to call them to account. They're going to get their paycheck on Friday, and nobody will ever put them in a court case for malpractice or for a violation of the Nuremberg Code. And it ain't going to happen to any of these guys. And it's probably happening right now while we're doing that. I mean, certainly overseas in poor countries, it's happening. So AZT is still being used. The intervention is triggered by either the test or no test. You didn't have a test. You can't prove you don't have it. We're giving you AZT. Or by the risk protocol. Well, you're poor. You don't have anybody to back you up. We'll just, the protocol says we can do it. We're going to do it because we're zealots. We're AIDS zealots. AIDS is everywhere. And HIV. Well, we've talked about this ad infinitum, but the test, there is no AIDS test. There's a thing called an HIV test. That's a fraud too. All it does is show that you might at some point in your life been exposed to something that looks like the antigen that may be related to the HIV virus, but of course there are over 100 different ways you can get a false positive. But based on that, we're going to give a newborn AZT and we're going to give her mother an IV. I don't, it's, this is real. Apparently, I mean, it's on their websites right now. So anybody can read this language directly in the published guidance. So anyway, this is what writing this book has been like. I mean, I was trying to finish this tuberculosis chapter, and I just sort of went off on a wondering. I don't even know how I got to this, and I pulled on this thread, and I said, wait a minute, you're not telling me they're giving they're still using AZT, are you? Oh yes, but only on pregnant, only on women in labor and newborns. I'm like, what? That can't be true. So I'm typing in and looking all over the place. It's like, yeah, and I've given you all how it's done, why it's done, and who's on the receiving end. Who's on the receiving end of this? And what does this boil down to? Well, whoever owns the AZT patent, and of course that I believe whoever owns that is still paying NIH. We still don't know because there are individual employees of the federal government at NIH that receive royalty payments on drugs. Remember how we got to get out. We got to get after that one. We got to know who those people are. It cannot be a state secret who's getting what individuals are getting royalty payments from the drug makers. That cannot be a state secret, and yet it is. So anyway, somebody or somebodies are getting a nice fat paycheck every year, because AZT is still alive. They're still using it. And what are they doing? They're literally, who is more vulnerable in this world than a woman in labor? Nobody. And that's where they're dumping their AZT. Okay, so anyway, this is all part of the process of writing the book, Diabolical Errors. And I have an excerpt version that's out now. It's just sort of 5 standalone chapters. The real book is going to be a monster. But it's going to show you how this system really works. And it's not just the pharmaceutical companies. It's absolutely politicians. And it's absolutely, power mad people of all kinds. And fraud-ridden doctors, of which there are, unfortunately, is no shortage. And fraud-ridden researchers. I mean, we got a real problem. We got like huge percentage of our gross national product going to medicine that doesn't work, that hurts, that injures, that kills. And then we're spending all this research money on guys that really, they have the ethics of vipers, you know. That's kind of what we got. So we're making, progress is made bit by bit. But I guess the bottom line, the thing is, whenever you've got a problem, or if you think you have a problem, you got to start researching it yourself. And I got to say, this ChatGPT is not bad. You have to prod it, because it loves to give the party line. But it's funny, it's really interesting. If you beat on it and you don't accept, and you can call it out. You can say, that sounds like bullshit to me. And it'll come back and say, well, you're actually right. It is the logic that's the medical community is using is a bit weak, you know. But you got to prod. You never ask this thing the question and think it's going to give you the right answer right off the bat. But if you jam it and just don't let it give up. Don't let it evade you, and keep drilling down. Like I said, this whole process of finding out that women in labor and babies are still um, are still being given AZT. This took, a couple of hours. I had to dig and dig and dig and ask questions and da, 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 da. So this is why the book, you can see why this book is taking so long. I didn't plan this. I was going to finish the tuberculosis chapter this morning. I don't think I'm going to make it, but that's all right. I'll just keep at it. But I wanted you to see what's going on behind the scenes. And this, I think this will help me too, because I've been sort of like, not, I'm feeling this I thought this thing was going to be done in August. Then I thought it was going to be done in October. Then I thought it was going to be done before Christmas. Then I thought it was going to be done before the end of the new year. Then and now here and I was sure it was going to be finished by the end of this month. And now I've given up. It's like I haven't given up, but I'm saying this thing's going to take as long as it's going to take. I do hope it's done by the spring, but I have figured out that I am going to stop for diabolical errors. I'm going to contain it up to the beginning of the 20th century, which is where really all the rotten foundation was laid. And then the second book is going to go on the mayhem that they're committing today, and how the second book is how to protect yourself from it. And it's hard because like you have all this stuff, this stuff, and you want it out there, but time only works one. You can only do one thing at a time. So I'm trying to get this history done so people can see beyond a shadow of a doubt that we cannot blindly trust medicine. We just cannot. Um, Especially when you go in when they go in, they give you a lab test and they tell you got to take these drugs. And that is crap 90% of the time. I'm saying I'm not a doctor. I'm not your doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm giving logical advice. That's not how medicine used to be done. If you were lucky enough to have a decent doctor and the doctor cared about you and cared about his work or her work, they would spend time understanding all the factors of your life to identify, okay, what is tearing you down? We got to find, oh, you drink a quarter scotch every night? Yeah, you know what? We may need to focus on that first. You don't probably need any pharmaceuticals right now. We need to figure out why you're doing that. I mean, I'm giving a dramatic example. But we all have things in our lives that we may not even be aware of. Foods we eat, behaviors we engage in, things that we think are risk-free. Um, Inactivity, for example, not risk-free. Sedentary lifestyle, not risk-free. You might as well drink a quart of scotch every night if you're totally sedentary because you're getting the same negative effect on your body. Right. So anyway, there's all these millions of things that in a sane society, we would grow up, we would learn it in grade school, and as we got older, we'd get more and more sophisticated in our understanding. And then when we went to a doctor, we'd all be sort of on the same page, and they would say, oh, you know what? You really got to look after these three things in your life because, like, for instance, let me give you one, and then I'm going to get going. You can take all the supplements in the world, right? And that's the problem. There's a million people selling supplements, and you go on the web, and you need this, and you need that, and maybe some of it's good. I don't, I take certain things, but very selectively. Um, None of that will overcome a bad diet. Like you can't say, well, I'm going to have, cold cereal for breakfast. I'm going to have McDonald's for lunch and Chinese food for dinner. I'm sorry, guys. Supplements are not going to overcome that. Okay? They're meant to supplement, you know. You might have had, you might have some reason that you need supplementation, either environmental, which we all have to contend with, or something in your particular life that requires supplementation. But supplementation can't overcome bad diet. Supplementation can't overcome not getting the rest you need. Like you're not going to boost, like they take like spinach, Popeye, he rips open the can, he takes the spinach, and now he's got the muscles pop out. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. There are certain non-negotiables, good nutrition, good rest, activity, reasonable. You don't have to go to a gym and pump iron, but reasonable activity. These are non-negotiable. And our medical system they don't deal with that. They just take your blood, look at the test. You need drug X, Y, and Z. Here you go. I'm done. I'm a doctor. That's not a doctor. It's a drug dispenser. It's a drug vending machine, an inconvenient and annoying and expensive drug vending machine. We got a history of medicine that goes back thousands of years. That's the other point I'm going to be making in this book. And in the late 19th century and early 20th century, it was scorched earth. All other forms of medicine, all other medical schools of thought, all other medical practice that didn't boil down to a lab test and a prescription were eradicated. And we're building it back. We're building it back. Thank God for the internet. Thank God for ChatGPT. I have to say it. Thank God for YouTube. You have to be selective. Um, but what you can do, this is really interesting. You see something, you can you can now get it. It's complicated. It's not complicated, but you can get the transcript off of most YouTube videos now. If you hunt around, you'll find it. There's a button, you push it. They make it really inconvenient to copy and paste it, but you can do it. You can do that, take that, drop that into ChatGPT and say, critique this video. Say, tell me where it's right, tell me where it's wrong. And it will come at you from a very conservative viewpoint, but that's not a bad place to start. And then you can prod it and say, are you really right, sure about that? Aren't you being a little, and you will get closer and closer and closer to the truth. And anyway, that's what's going on. So this is what's happening behind the scenes. And it's a big relief for me to let you know that, just so you know, I'm not goofing off. I'm really not. I'm really working on this book. This book is going to happen. I have to remind myself this because it's easily the hardest task I've ever attempted writing this book. Anyway, see you all later. Am I recording? Yes, I am. Okay, I'm going bye. Bye.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.